Okay, so I feel like the big question for this preview is obviously why should rugby fans subscribe to FloRugby for the Rugby Championship? What makes it so exciting, and how does it differ from the Six Nations?
Sure. Well, I guess the main crux of it is every Rugby World Cup that has taken place, bar one, the winner has come from a Rugby Championship. So it's been Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa have collected pretty much all the titles, with England being the one exception in 2003. Historically, you would always have South Africa and New Zealand are always within the top two for the majority of history in the world rankings. Now, the Six Nations is a great competition in its own right. It's very different, where the teams play each other once. In the Rugby Championship, they'll play each other twice. So it's really exciting. This year, Australia will be traveling to South Africa for their first two matches, whilst New Zealand hit the road and go to Argentina for their two matches. That opening round is super interesting. Last year, Argentina beat New Zealand in New Zealand, which was the second time they've done that, and they've previously beaten them in Australia during the COVID lockdown. So that was the first time Argentina had ever beaten New Zealand. So they'll be really looking to double down on that side. For Australia, the task of going to face the back-to-back world champions, massive, absolutely massive. They did win the final match of the British and Irish Lions series. Personally, I don't really read into it too much. The Lions just didn't show up. They'd been celebrating having already won the series. But for the Wallabies, what they don't want to do is take two big defeats. If they can get close, and if they steal a result, it's huge. So, yeah, I think for fans to get into it, it's super intriguing. This will play out. This year's championship is really important in terms of the world rankings for the next World Cup seeding. So super important. And it's also just great to see where everybody sits. South Africa have never won the tournament back-to-back. New Zealand's the only team to have done that. So for pretty much every team, there's history on the table this season.
Talking about the World Cup, which I think the next one comes in 27.
It does.
How do the results from the Rugby Championship go into the pool draw?
Sure. So how they're going to work, the Rugby World Cup's expanding next time around in 2027 to include more teams. So there's quite a significant jump. So the whole pool structure is going to change. The last Rugby World Cup was an absolute disaster from a draw standpoint, because when they did the draw, they did it way too early. And at that point, the rankings didn't reflect what they would be in 2023. So for example, we got to 2023, and the top five ranked teams in the world were all on the same side of the draw, which was just, silly. So you had Ireland and South Africa and Scotland in one pool, which meant Scotland got knocked out before the quarterfinal stages. You then had France and New Zealand in a pool, and France beat New Zealand. So you then ended up with quarterfinals of the top four sides in the world, where you had New Zealand versus Ireland in the quarterfinal, South Africa versus France in another quarterfinal. And then on the other side of the draw, you had teams who were way off it in terms of form. You had England, Argentina, Fiji had a really good World Cup. They made a quarterfinal, and also Wales made the quarterfinals that year. So they then moved the World Cup pool draw later in the cycle. So we're a year out, for example, coming in at the end of this year. So how it would work now, instead of having four pools, we're going to have six pools at the next Rugby World Cup. So you really want to be in the top six to be in the top band. Teams 1 to 6, I don't see a huge amount changing. I think we'll still have South Africa, New Zealand, Ireland, France, England, and if I was to guess it would be either Argentina or Scotland will take that sixth slot, and that'll be the sort of the first group. So it doesn't really matter as much this year as long as you're in the top six. The next six, again, it'll be fine because you'll still get out into the knockout stages. I guess for the Rugby Championship teams, it's better to finish higher because you don't want to end up with a really strong Six Nations team. So, for example, the last World Cup, South Africa won, but Ireland beat them in the pool, right? Which materially in the end, it didn't make a massive difference, but it could the next time around, because it could set up an All Blacks Springbok quarterfinal, and then it's anyone's game. So, yeah, you basically want to be as high as you can. I think when we get to the end of the year, I'd be very surprised if South Africa weren't still number one, unless they get swept by the All Blacks. But they have a really tough year this year. They've got some really tough fixtures coming up in November, most notably against Ireland, which we talk about bogey teams. In recent years, Ireland are South Africa's bogey team. So, yeah, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying you really want to be in the top six. For me, South Africa and New Zealand will definitely be in that top six. I think Argentina will. For Australia, could be the biggest winners. If they can get up to that top six and stay there, that'll be huge for them. So I guess for all the teams going into it, Argentina and Australia, they need to get as many points as they can. The Box and the All Blacks are locked in there for me.
who is one veteran on any squad that's going into the Rugby Championship whose performance you say would be maybe a deciding factor for their outcome?
I think sort of each team has some really good veteran players. I think just sticking with Australia for a second, Will Skelton's just this huge, physically massive player, but more importantly, he's sort of a spiritual leader for the Wallabies. He was huge against the British and Irish Lions when he came back in. He missed the first test through injury, and then he played a big part in the second test, which the Wallabies were leading. And ironically, when he departed and Rob Valentini departed, Australia then lost that test. The third test, he was absolutely huge again. With Skelton, he's played big roles in every team he's in. So Will Skelton for Australia, I guess, is probably a big one. For Argentina, there's quite a few players. Pablo Matera always comes up. You've got Julian Montoya. And there's a few different players. For me, actually, Juan Cruz Malia is probably the most exciting and important player for Argentina. He's absolutely electric. Plays for Stade Toulousain and is one of the best players in the world at the moment. New Zealand, of course, Artie Sevilla is key. I think he's at a point in his career where he's at his absolute peak mentally and physically. And for me, he's the best player in the world, bar none. And then when it comes to South Africa, there's a few of Siya Kolisi, the long-term captain, two-time World Cup winning captain. I actually could see him being under threat for his place, just given how competitive the South African back row is. And he's had quite a few injuries over the past season, a lot of stuff off the pitch with, being such a big star around the world in terms of being sort of a sporting global icon. What is Siya going to do? Is Siya going to be at the next World Cup? And if he is, he needs a really big Rugby Championship in 2025 because Springboks have some young bucks coming through that back row. They've obviously got a load of veteran players there too who could just slot into his number 6 shirt with ease.
Who are you going to be rooting for, and what's highly anticipated about the Rugby Championship for you?
Yeah, so I'm Irish originally, but I grew up in Cape Town, so so the Springboks are firmly my second team. I grew up in Cape Town for pretty much my whole childhood. So I love South Africa. I love the South African people. I think the Bok fans are brilliant, even when they're absolutely annihilating me online. I think they're great fun, and I love the passion. I love how much they love their team, and it's great having the Springboks back being a force because there was a really five year stretch there where they were just an absolute shambles till Rassie came back and made a big difference. So for me, I want the Bucks to win it. I think it'd be great if they can claim a back-to-back title. So yeah, I guess for me that would be the team I'm going after. But I'm interested in all of these teams. I mean, I'm firmly an Irish fan first, so checking out who we're going to be facing because we've got I think we've got pretty much all of the Southern Hemisphere teams this November. So it's nice to see how they're playing. I'm very familiar with the South African teams, especially through the URC, which we have on FloRugby. Watching all of the South African players play in that. Obviously, a lot of their frontline players play elsewhere. But yeah, I guess the Springboks versus All Blacks at Eden Park, that is going to be huge. Now, the All Blacks don't lose at Eden Park. They just don't. I think you have to go back to 1994. I think it's about 50 test matches, and I'm pretty sure it was France beat them there the last time. So for South Africa, that's another big scalp. If they can beat the All Blacks in Eden Park, that is huge. That'll be right up there with anything they've achieved outside of World Cups. Obviously the World Cup for South Africa is the pinnacle on that side of things. So winning outside of that and winning at Eden Park, beating their biggest rivals, that would be massive on the road. That's why I was kind of saying I'm pretty confident that the All Blacks will at least split with the Springboks because they just don't lose at Eden Park. But yeah, I'm really interested to see that one. That for me, that will be the game of the year. That has a real potential to be the best test match in 2025. So well worth tuning in for.